Good evening. This is an informal meeting of the Gardner City Council on Monday, October 3rd, 2022. I would like to ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Council Bluth?
Present.
Council Boudreaux?
Present.
Council Craig-Cormier? Council Ron-Cormier?
Present.
Council Lowitz?
Present.
Council Harder?
Present.
Council Heath?
Present.
Council Mack?
Present.
Council Tyler?
Present.
Council Walsh?
Present.
And President Kuzmich.
Present. Is anyone recording tonight's meeting? For the public watching this evening, we are meeting informally tonight regarding agenda item number 10781, an act relative to establish a special act charter drafting committee. A regular meeting will follow this meeting at 7:30 p.m. this evening, which will give the council the opportunity to vote on the item. I would like to read what the vote on the item would be. Section 1, that there be established a special act charter drafting committee consisting of 3 members to be appointed by the mayor and confirmed by 2/3 vote of the city council. Said committee shall draft a special act charter for the city for submission to the general court and placement on the municipal general election ballot. Section 2, the committee shall meet in open session, hold public hearings, and shall submit its draft special act to the city council for its consideration. Section 3, upon final action on the draft special act charter by the city council, the special act charter drafting committee shall be dissolved. Regarding tonight's informal meeting topic, Mayor Nicholson has asked that the city council vote to establish a special act charter drafting committee to review our city charter and submit proposed amendments to it. I would like to note that the mayor submitted an outline to the city of the issues and updates that he believes should be reviewed in the city charter as it currently exists, but that is not what we are discussing here this evening. Additionally, on that note, if the city council votes to create the committee, then the committee may consider the mayor's suggestions or not, and also any other sections of the charter in their process. And also, I want to be very clear that the question before the city council is whether to create the committee to review the charter, and that is the topic of discussion for tonight's informal meeting. Mayor Nicholson has also joined us here this evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The informal meeting discussion is now open. Does anyone have anything they would like to discuss regarding tonight's topic?
I do. I have several questions, and I disagree with your assessment that the mayor's proposals for changes are not a topic for discussion because they're central to what the mayor, what the mayor's initiative was to establish this special act charter review committee, and it's his initiative to do it. He presented to the council. He explained in general terms with what I call platitudes the reasons why he thought it was a good idea, which boiled out essentially to it being 100 years old. So I disagree that the mayor's proposals and the committee will be established with membership according to his proposal of appointments by him, subject to council confirmation. It's reasonable to expect that that committee would provide deference to the mayor's suggestions for the changes that he believes should be made. And I'm not passing judgment, at least not today, on what those are, but to say that his proposed changes are not central to whether or not this special act charter committee should be established, I think is erroneous. My questions are, first of all, I understand the idea behind it. I've read the charter review, the vote that we're being asked to take. Much of what you've proposed, in my view, is kind of housekeeping. But having been through a process of charter review a few years ago that was lengthy and contentious and difficult and ultimately unsuccessful, I have a fairly narrow and skeptical view of whether these things should be established at all, especially since we have a 100-year-old charter that's worked very effectively. And so my first question is there any urgency to moving on this?
If I may, Madam President.
Go ahead.
Thank you. In terms of urgency, no, the government is running fine, and I think the system of government is working well, too. And that's why I had no problem just showing the housekeeping changes that I think should be made. I think just updating the document. There were some sections, particularly in the proposals made by the city council 2 years ago, of sections that are just currently moot that we don't follow because they are currently in conflict with state law, where state law is more stringent or state law changes things there, as is outlined in the document that I submitted to the council as well. And it's just a way to make the governing document of the city match what the city's actual operations are, rather than question what's currently valid and what's not within the charter as well. Now, we do follow state law when that trumps, and I fully understand what state law does trump in places where the charter is less stringent than what state law requires. And I do understand that. Again, it's just really making it so that our actual governing document matches the operations. So that's really the only push that there was to go this. Urgency, no, because we're operating fine, and I think we are doing well. I think there's just some changes based off the experiences that we had in 2020, when we had an elongated period with an acting mayor that's brought up some new things that hadn't been thought up before, the sections that are currently in conflict with existing general laws, and just, like I said before, the general housekeeping that's there. And I've always viewed this as a collaborative process put forward. It's certainly deferential to the council in this, as it's not just a mayoral document, it's a city document. So I do believe more cooperation could be done than may have been experienced 2 years ago, or whenever the last time, or 2016, excuse me, between the branches of government, because again, this is a full city impact there. But no, the urgency, I think, is just making sure that we have documents that match what our actual operations are. I wouldn't call it urgent, no.
My next question is kind of twofold.
Mhm.
Is there anything in the provisions of the existing charter that prevent you from doing something that you should be able to do? The second part of that is there anything in the charter that you're obligated to do that you feel you shouldn't have to do?
In terms of prevention of things I'm able to do, no, because in those places where that would be an example of something in conflict with state statute, and those that I'm required to do by state law, in which case state law would carry over in those measures.
Something we already know
Yes,
and we currently operate under.
correct. In terms of things that I feel could be changed because of the way the charter is written right now that probably shouldn't rise to my level, there is a section in the city charter, it's included in the packet here, I forget the section right off the top of my head, that was written. It was originally proposed in 1923, and it was reconfirmed in a small amendment to the section in 1938 that requires the mayor to sign off on all contracts with a value over $1,000. $1,000 back in 1923 was $17,000 in today's money. So what it is every time the school department orders pencils or erasers or paper or things like that, they're not able to go through on that unless they get a signed contract by my office. It's caused conflict with certain vendors who now won't bid with the city because for a $1,000 contract, they need a $1,000 purchase, they'll need to do a written contract and what provisions are in that contract and things of that nature. So it does muddy up the process a little bit. There are certain checks and balances that weren't in effect in 1923 and 1939 when those items were put in and reaffirmed that exist now that didn't exist then. We track those more accurately now also through our computer-based accounting system that we have. And it's just, again, a change that would just make things a lot easier for our departments to function. I have no issue signing contracts. We check the warrant every week that I have to sign off anyway. Every time a check gets cut, I get a list of all the checks that are being cut that I have to sign off on in that matter. But that's a state law required account system that we have versus this, it's in the charter. So we're already reviewing those items just in a redundant manner that way. And state law now requires what the charter has for $1,000 for $10,000. But that's a case where the charter is more stringent than state law, therefore the charter governs operations, where if it was reversed, like in some cases in Section 33, where the charter is more lenient than state law governs in those manners. So it's just one of those conflicts that's there as well.
We just have your suggestions, 20 of them in number to the specific sections of the charter, 10 more for consideration, 30 overall proposals, at least specific or proposal. I've had the opportunity to go through them generally. we've got 45 minutes that we've given to that consideration here in an informal meeting. I'm hopeful that we'll have some more time to consider these, because I think what the expectation is for consideration by the Charter Committee, as evidenced by your proposals, is kind of central to the decision of whether or not to establish it in the first place. Because my view, and I'll end with this, is that in order to establish a charter review special act committee, there has to be a showing of a compelling need. And I'm not persuaded, at least at this point, that there's a compelling need for any of these. Although I haven't made any final decision, but I think that's the test. Is there a clear showing of a special need, or a compelling need, excuse me. And so I'm hopeful that we'll have the opportunity to consider this further, perhaps at another informal meeting after we've had the opportunity to digest the significance. This is our Constitution.
Yeah.
This is our municipal Constitution. And I think we should be very cautious and careful about setting in motion a process that won't be limited to what you suggest. It's wide open to any possibility that's legal. So I think we need to be cautious in deciding whether to open that box at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Further discussion? Questions? Counselor Roncomer?
Is one of several that were here during the original process, or not the original process, but the prior process of trying to change our charter. It was a very painful, contentious, expensive in time, not necessarily in dollars. There is no question that many of the items that the mayor has referred to, for our benefit actually, that refer to state laws that have changed and so on, that made our point moot, will continue to happen even if we do change charter. Whether we like it or not, the state is always making new mandates, new changes, and not always funding them. But so it will be it's a moving target, if you will. The concern I have is that many of that, I'd say 3/4 of what we're talking about, are really housekeeping issues. And whether we went through this process or not, it would seem that we should investigate if there is another process, perhaps through governmental action statewide, that we could clean up some of these things without going through this process. Because as I've pointed out, as soon as we've finished, it'll change again. The state will make sure of that. It's probably the only guarantee we have. So, but we really have to stop and look at this very, very carefully. I would hope we have a little bit more time to study both your proposals and the entire concept of changing our charter, because you very eloquently put that the charter has worked for 99 years, that it's been 99 years. But conversely, your argument is also two-sided. It's worked darn well. I haven't been here for all those 99 years, despite rumors to the contrary. Thank you.
Counselor, thank you. Counselor Harden?
Yes, change is good if needed, like Councilor Walsh stated, but change for just the sake of changing, I don't understand that, and I want to make sure that we do have a need for this. One thing in particular, there'll be a cost for this for the city, I'm sure, to do this. That's the question that I can ask through the president to the mayor.
So the cost associated, the hard cost, if you will, because I know Councilor Cormier did mention cost and time. That's
Yes.
different in this, I would say. The cost associated with the last time this went around was the city hired a consultant who reviewed other charters, who reviewed other charter amendment processes, wrote the draft based on what the committee was saying. There are ways to do that. That's not what I'm proposing be done. What we could do, what's a way around doing it is, rather than hiring a consultant to do, you hire basically the committee is appointed to review the charter and do the work themselves based on recommendations that they receive from me, from the council, from other stakeholders involved in that case. In which case, it's just a volunteer committee working through recommendations based on those involved in the city's government to move forward, in which case there wouldn't be the cost of hiring a consultant or any of that nature there, because it's really just amendments to the charter, whereas the last proposal that put up really made a new charter in and of itself, which is something I don't think is needed nor that we should be doing.
Okay.
Anything, Councilor?
Yes, I have one question here that's, I don't know if it's suitable at this time to ask it, but I'm going to. I believe it's on page, let's see here. Hold on 1 minute. There it is. Okay. It's on a proposed change that's listed here under section 5. And it is C. And it says, one of its members shall be elected. It did say annually by the council as its president. But you're proposing that we take out the annually.
So that was just a suggestion, sir. Again, these are just things that are here to start the discussion and that the committee would review. But as Councillor Walsh said, that this is something that's relevant to the discussion as to whether to create the committee. Looking at, if you see at the bottom of section D, it says deleted by chapter 332 of the Acts of 1936. There was language in that statute that took out other annual requirements from that section of the city charter, because before ward councilors were elected annually, not every 2 years as they are now. That section of the law changed that. And it looked, depending on how you read that statute, whether it's confusing whether or not that annually was meant to be part of that statute or meant to stay in. We followed it in practice. I don't think it makes a difference, but it was just meant to throw out there as something to be reviewed, whether or not what was passed in 1936 was actually followed or not. That's, again, just a housekeeping thing. That's something that doesn't affect me as mayor. That's a city council thing. But since I threw in all the other aspects that were included in previous laws and iterations that amended the charter before, that's the only reason that was thrown in there.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor? Councilor Boucher?
I like that you mentioned recommendations, but in reading this, I'm not seeing that it is set up that way. I know you would never appoint somebody that would go rogue, but there's nothing in here necessarily pointing to the fact that they have to accept recommendations and do what the will of the people is. Obviously, it wouldn't pass, but I'm just pointing out that it does not state that implicitly anywhere in this document.
Are you talking about these, Councilor?
I'm talking about the actual,
Yes, but the recommendations that
Yeah.
you're talking, what I've submitted to the council.
or anything. Or a recommendation from me, recommendation from Madam President, anybody.
Yeah.
They don't have to.
So the process for amending a charter by state law, there's very specific processes that are outlined through that. In towns that don't have a charter, it's through special act of the legislature, but in cities that do have a or towns too that do have a charter, the process is usually, unless we can see if there's a special circumstance, like Councilor Cormier had pointed out, it's a creation of a committee that's either appointed by the executive, confirmed by the legislature, that reviews the document, makes those recommendations to the city council, so that any changes that the committee proposes aren't done by them. They're actually done by the city council in the end. The council votes to accept them. It's then votes to accept them by placing them on a ballot in a municipal election, in which case the people then vote to send it to Boston or not. And if the people vote yes on it, it goes to the state legislature, where it has to pass the House, Senate, and then be signed by the governor before any of these changes take into place. But the city council actually has full amendment authority over anything that comes from this committee. This committee is just charged with reading the document, drafting those recommendations, and doing basically the work that the consultant did 6 years ago.
Oh, I understand the checks and
Yeah.
balances of the process.
Yeah,
I
I
was here
Yeah.
in 2014 through 16 and paying attention before that. I was just noting that it does not say anywhere in there that they must seek and follow the recommendation
Yeah.
of the people or any elected or appointed member of our community.
Yeah, and that's just how
I get it.
the state sample comes.
We're good.
They are required to do a public hearing as part of their process as well. in
And I
the
guess
state
that is
legislature.
that is recommendation.
Correct.
Oh. Thank you.
Councilor Mack, did you have your hand up earlier?
Yeah, I did.
Go ahead.
That's okay. I'm actually for a review of the charter, and I have been for quite some time, even prior to being on the council. A couple of things that I feel that a charter committee is making recommendations. They're reviewing. They're not actually changing it. And there are aspects of our charter that I do feel that need to be changed and changed with the times. And I'm just going to give an example, and some people may think that this was just a one-time occurrence, but I disagree. That we did to have 2 acting mayors, and the charter does not allow that person to be compensated. Most people are not allowed to leave their professional position, and most people are not allowed to dedicate the amount of time it takes without any type of compensation. 2 people did, okay? Should they had to? No, but our charter dictates that they were not compensated. That's just one of many. I just have a hard time with opposition for the sake of it's 100 years old and it's worked this far. I mean, everything has changed. Gardner has changed. The makeup of City Hall has changed. I don't see the harm of having a committee look and give us recommendations. They are not changing the charter. They are not rewriting the charter. They're going to give proposals to us, and then we take it from there. But to adamantly for people to say, we shouldn't look at it, it's not time, it's 99 years, I totally disagree with. Because this is our job. This is, we're part of the legislature, we're the executive. This is our checks and balances of this city. And if you read through even the recommendations, I'm just going to go to the back page. Look at all of the things. An act of 1947, while no longer in practice, was never repealed. 1939, 1960. I mean, this needs to be updated. And if people are concerned about the changes, then that's when you look at the makeup of the committee. I don't think there should be just 3 people on the committee. I think there should be a nice balance of the committee. I think it should be an odd number and not everybody appointed by the mayor. But I just think that people sometimes have to realize that change has to occur. And the mayor's proposals are just that, proposals. He is not rewriting the charter. And my guess is the proposals had to have come from somewhere, whether it's somebody who asked to say, if we are going to do this, what is you suggesting? Why do you want us to look at this charter? These came from somewhere. So I just want to say that I'm in favor of this. I think the committee should be, a little bit larger. But I really, I personally question the hesitation because just because it's worked for 99 years doesn't mean it's going to work moving forward. And it doesn't mean, and when you look at this, and I have read this, that the language doesn't need to be cleaned up. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Further discussions from anyone? Counselor Tyros?
You beat me to that.
Counselor Boone?
Thank you. I do understand what Councilor Mack is saying, and it always drove me kind of crazy because it's, change is not good, or it's always worked that way. Well, why don't we leave it the same? But I do agree with Councilor Walsh that things have worked, and our Constitution of the United States hasn't changed. But with that said, I'm having a problem that was thrown on us Thursday, and now we're having to make a decision today without having enough notice, enough time to research, enough time to fully absorb, the different changes. And I do appreciate, Mr. Mayor, all your comments and proposals, and I think that's great, because last time we had the committee, it got thrown on us all at once. I forget how many members there were, 5 or on the last committee?
5.
So I guess personally I need more time to absorb. I'm not opposed to reviewing and looking at some of the things, especially the things that are ridiculous, to be honest. I think the mayor should be a 4-year term. What, did I say that? So I just want to point that out. I just think I need more time to absorb. Thank you.
Counselor Tyros?
Thank you, Madam President. I think we were told that this was coming in August, so I think there was a little more time maybe get the specific details a little more recently. But I'm kind of sitting here and wondering why this is such a contentious thing. I know it's a very important document in the governance of our city, but it's kind of getting a ship of Theseus complex kind of growing where, you know, it's a 100-year-old document, but boards need to be replaced or modified. And we've seen that given the sheer number of amendments that are proposed that aren't finalized and have to go through a process. But Councilor Walsh had said a compelling reason. I do think the situation we were in 2020 with the acting mayor is a compelling reason. I think it was really great that we had 2 councilors step up and help run the city in that time. And I think that's a change that I would certainly support. So I think the one question I have for the mayor is the 3-member committee. Could you give any insight or opinion on the qualifications or experiences that you would have as members of that committee?
Sure, and I should say too, to Councilor Mack's point too, the 3-member committee is the minimum that's required by state law. If that changes because the council wants to see an expanded group or wants to see a different appointing authority for some members, I'm okay with that. That's just the proposal that's there. I can tell you the 3 individuals specifically that I had in mind for the committee when I put this forward was Attorney Bob Rice, former state representative, former assistant city solicitor for several years, who's been around for a while, former city council president Neil Janssens, and Mrs. Tina Griffin, who have all been involved in the city and been a part of different organizations in the city for several years. I can tell you if the committee was created, those would be the 3 that I would be appointing to that. But again, I'm not opposed to a change in the makeup of the committee, a change in whether the council or the council president or a different change like that, and appointing some members of the committee or expanding it. I do say in my letter, I do think that too large of a committee may muck up the process just a little bit. But that said, it's a conversation started because, again, I want this to be a collaborative process if it does move forward. Because this isn't something that just affects the executive branch. It affects the city as a whole because it is our city's constitution. So if that change is what the pleasure of the council is at the time, I would not be opposed to it, even though that it's a council vote anyway, so it wouldn't come to me anyway. But I think it'd be more collaborative. Thank you.
Councilor Tyros?
Thank you.
Councilor Heath?
Yes, so obviously I wasn't here a couple years ago when the first time this was a go-around. I just had an interview recently where I went ahead and I said that I think anything that's looked at 100 years needs to be re-looked at. I mean, the world has changed. In the last 100 years, there's 6 of us that wouldn't be allowed at this table that's right here in this room right now, having this conversation, including TT. You know, that includes the women here, minorities. You know, with that being said, I think it needs to be looked at. I don't know if 3 is the magic number, maybe 5, considering there's 5 wards. But that's something, you know, I just wanted to go ahead and go say. But yeah, I'm definitely open for something to be looked at, open for suggestions. I think a point of view and hearing from the outside is always a good thing. That's all.
Thanks, Councilor. Councilor Laws?
Thank you. I'll be brief. I think both sides, the argument made good points. I think the compelling reason here, it is that old. There are changes that need to be made. I understand people wanting more time. That's something that makes people more comfortable. Maybe that's the route we go. It has worked for 100 years, so it's not a rush to do anything. I know the Constitution was brought up, but I remember correctly, I believe it was amended as recently as 1992. So maybe it's time we make some amendments to ours. With the time, so as the mayor explained, it is a time cost. The monetary cost is negligible. So in the long run, I don't see what would hurt to allow this committee to be formed, whether it's larger than currently proposed, which may make sense, or not. They're going to come back with their recommendations, and at that point, then it's on this body here to make a choice. Thank you.
Councilor Boucher?
I don't want anyone to think I'm against this. Adorning the wall of my office in Princeton states the most dangerous phrase in our language is we've always done it this way. But I do firmly feel that as a council, if any individual counselor or group of counselors feels like they need more time to absorb or take it in or think, we should grant them that time. As multiple counselors have said, there's no rush on this. It's been 100 years. It's not take 100 more, but maybe 2 weeks, a month won't hurt the process. I would be interested in looking further at the makeup of the committee, because I would like to see maybe the appointing authority come from a couple different directions. Obviously, we don't want a 11-member board that rivals the size of the council taking on this task, but maybe 5 with a couple of different people coming from different appointing authorities wouldn't hurt the task. And I'm just going to support someone that asked for more time just because I respect my fellow counselors and would like them to be able to make the best and most informed decision they can make. Thank you.
Counselor. Counselor Walsh.
Just, I suggested the need for more time initially, and I believe that, and it was amplified by other counselors. I think this is an important decision, almost momentous. It happens rarely. I just want to point out that 7 years ago, or 6 years ago, finally, it wasn't just an amendment. It wasn't just an amendment to certain sections of the charter. It was an amendment by substitution of an entire rewrite of the charter. And that can happen. And what motivated that, we don't need to get into today, but it wasn't simply, after that substitution occurred, council ordered or requested a comprehensive review of the existing charter of the law department, which took several months to achieve. The recommendations by the law department then went to a section-by-section review by the council over the course of several meetings. The council formulated a package that it passed, and because the mayor didn't approve of it, it couldn't be passed because constitutionally, by state constitution, the mayor has to approve, I think the language is approve, any change in the charter. So that is where it ended up, because the council passed it, a very comprehensive review of section-by-section review, but because the mayor didn't agree with it, it didn't go anywhere with the legislature. I think we need to spend some time on this. I was going to originally suggest that we reconvene in an informal session at the first meeting in November. Unfortunately, I'll be away at that. Maybe that's good for. So I was going to suggest, and I moved to table the item, and I intend to do so at our next meeting, or when we go into our regular meeting, to the second regular meeting of November. Give everybody a chance to digest all of these suggested changes. Consider amendments to the vote that we might take for membership and number of memberships and where they might come from. And it gives us, I think, an opportunity to settle into this in a thoughtful way. So that's what I intend to do during the meeting, is to table discussion of this to an informal meeting prior to our second meeting in November. Thank you.
Councilor Mack.
I should say, I agree with Councilor Walsh. I think putting it off, giving people more time, and I think in addition to the makeup of the meeting, I think that the makeup of the committee, I think it has to be very clear to the committee and to this council what the expectation is. You know what I mean? What they're actually doing that, so it doesn't happen what happened in 2016. Because there was a lot of, I watched a lot of those things, but I think that, there was a lot of, I don't know, I don't know if it's misunderstanding or what, but I just think that if people are going to spend their time, then it has to be clear what the purpose is.
Councilor.
If I may, just respond very briefly. we can't restrict what they consider.
Okay.
It's open. If somebody wanted to come in at a public hearing and propose that the package that was presented to us in 2016 be substituted for what, as the one that we done, and the committee agreed with that, that's what we could do. We can't restrict what they consider.
Can I think my clarification is that they go in this knowing that they're making, that they're making suggestions and proposals, that they don't think that they're actually, what they say is what actually is going to occur. I just want to clarify that.
Well, I understand.
Okay.
I have something to say. I would just like to, there's a couple things here. I understand taking time. I totally agree with that. I think that's part of our jobs is what we do here as city councilors. I think it's really important to look at the issues and be able to study them and ask questions and make informed votes and decisions. I stand by the way that I opened the meeting and what I said the purpose of this meeting is for. We are voting on establishing a committee. I think what we're talking about a lot now is what that committee's purpose is and what happened in the past and how we hope it to look at it diligently moving forward. And things are different. We have a different mayor than we had in 2016. We have a different city council than we had in 2016, and we now have that experience that we learned from that time as well. And I think that's going to make this a better process for us now because we do have that to look back at. Certainly, I'm certainly in favor of establishing this committee, but I also want to do it in a thoughtful way that's going to hold up the integrity of the council and the work that we do as a council. It should take time. It's really, really important. I think we've established that here today. But, with the mayor's suggestions and the things he had, and as, I had said, as Councilor Walsh said, they can suggest what they want. They can look at every aspect of it. They can do that. Councilor Mack's point, yeah, we want to make sure they understand that on the committee. But what we're looking at, and if we do extend at Councilor Walsh's suggestion to the second meeting in November, that's fine. In my opinion, we take the time to be able to do it. It gives us time to look at these suggestions further and really think about what we're doing here and why we're doing it and who might be in charge of doing it. But there is a process here. Bless you. I'm not sure if that was
It was a compliment, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, sure. But I think it's really important for us to remember that the process is if this committee is established, it goes to the committee, it comes back to the council, it goes to the mayor. It doesn't just go through a few phases here. There is public hearings. There's a lot that goes into it. But again, I think it's time to do it. I agree with the whole idea that something's been 100 years and it's been a long time. This process is going to be this process no matter when it gets done, if it ever gets done. So that's not going to change. So I do think there's time to do it. I do think we have a cause to do it.
Fine.
Go ahead.
I just want to throw it on my end too. Like I said at the beginning of this, the main goal I would have with these discussions is collaboration. So I don't think I ever thought that this was something that was going to be voted on today, nor did I think it was something that was going to be voted on next meeting. I think it is something that does deserve a look at, and that's why I keep saying that this should be a collaborative process, and being a collaborative process means having enough time to fully understand what goes into it, reasonings and things like that nature. So I just want to clarify that. The last thing I want to clarify is, while I submitted information on things that I believe should be changed and would support seeing changes like that made, one thing I just want to throw out there is one thing that I would not support being made, that I didn't think was meant for this type of a document that was put in, is changing the city's Plan B form of government with a mayoral executive and a city council as the legislative, with the city council approving the majority of all appointments by the mayor. The other plans of government that could change with the charter change could amend any of those things. I don't believe those are right for what meets Gardner's needs, and that our general form and operation and setup and construction of the city's government right now is what Gardner needs. It's the nuts and bolts that make up that construction that I believe we should be looking at, seeing what's working, what's not, what's currently effective, what's not effective, what's been replaced, but we just left it up in the scaffolding at the same time. So that's really what I believe should be looked at with this, not any major changes, nor would I support a full rewrite of the charter, just for clarification and a note of a difference between 6 years ago too, because I feel like that's worthy of being made as well. Thank you.
Excuse me 1 second, Counselor. I just think that, I think the conversation has to start somewhere. So if you start with an informal meeting and you want to have more time, you want to take more meetings time to do that, I think that's perfectly reasonable to be able to do it. But when something's put on the council agenda, we always have to remember that you don't have to vote at that meeting on that item. You can take the time that you need on it. We've done that. I think we do it really well and diligently. And so I don't think, I'm not sure if that was ever the intention, but putting it on the agenda, it's got to get on there if you want to have it talked about. And that's the decision that was made. Councilor Boudreaux.
Mr. Mayor, I know we talked about it earlier. I would like to thank you for going on the record this evening in support of our city's type of governance. I believe a Plan E like Worcester or Lowell with a city manager and a council is appropriate in some places, but it does not fit the characteristics or historical nature of our community. So I'd like to thank you for going on the record about that today. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Councilor. Further
Very
discussion?
quickly.
Councilor Boone, sure.
So confirmation, we're not planning on hiring a consultant to go through the whole charter again.
No, I think we've already done that, 1, and 2, you really don't need that unless you're rewriting the charter, which is something I wouldn't be in support of.
Last thing, I just, again, want to thank you for putting together things in writing on what's proposed and giving us time to, well, hopefully time to absorb everything that's being proposed. And you're trying to be collaborative, as you said, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Councilor, further discussion? There is nothing further. Thank you, councilors. Thank you, Mayor Nicholson. We will close this part of the meeting. We'll reconvene in 1 minute at 7:30 for our regular meeting. Thank you.
Perfect.
Just a couple things on safety I want to talk. I need to see Ashley, right?